In this video we're going to talk a little bit about how to do a couple of basic special effects puncture wounds. We're going to start with the slit wrist, and for this we're going to use a few basic products. We're going to use Mortician's wax. This is Mortician's wax, and it is got a very firm consistency but not as firm as nose and scar wax. Then we're going to use some Prozaid to attach it. You can also substitute that for spirit gum. I've tried it without any kind of bonding agent, and it works okay that way as well. And then we're going to use some black grease-based paint, and then we're going to use a little Mayron pan stick for blending. We're going to need a spatula for decanting our foundation and also to produce the actual knife wound in the medium. And finally, we're going to use some abrasion blood. This is made by Makeup International, London, UK. And this is simulated abrasion blood, which is really good for high-def special effects. So we're going to start with a light application of Prozaid onto the wrist. So we're going to put our slit wrist right along these arteries. So we're going to take a little bit of Prozaid and just run it along that area. Then we're going to take some Mortician's wax, and you can use a spatula or your fingers to decant it. I like just grabbing a little bit with my fingers. And now that should just dry just a little bit, so we'll let that dry and come back. Okay, our Prozaid is dried, and now we're just going to take some Mortician's wax, and we're just going to make a seam along the wrist. And then we can blend our Mortician's wax down. We can feather it out at the edges. And other side. You can use a little alcohol on your fingertips. I just use paper towel to remove product, but you can use alcohol as a solvent to clean the wax off. And we're just going to blend this down and into the skin. And if you spend some time at this, you get a fairly seamless blend except around the hairs. So there we've produced a second layer of skin with Mortician's wax. I'm going to keep it a little bit gristly, but you can also blend it more cleanly. You can spend some time on it and really blend it, get it worked in really nicely. Then we're going to take our spatula and we're going to produce the cut. So the cut is now made along here. And then what we're going to do very carefully is grab a really fine synthetic brush like this, and we're going to dab a little bit of this black grease paint on it. And then to simulate depth, we're going to very carefully cut with the brush. So now we've produced a little bit of depth in there. Now what we want to do is we can use a combination of things. Let me stop the camera. There's different ways we can get our blood effects. We're going to use abrasion blood in the center of the wound, have it leaking out. We've got a trauma wheel by Ben 9. We've got regular red grease-based foundation. And then we have a bruise simulation makeup, which I'll demonstrate here. Whoopsie, not opened yet. Fresh batch. And this is for bruising simulation. So I could use that in the wound as well, but it's, as you see, it's really designed for doing bruising effects. So we've got a couple of different products to work with here. So I'm going to go in favor of the trauma wheel. And we're just going to take a second synthetic brush, an angle brush maybe, so we have some angles to work with. can bevel it. And I'm just going to put a little bit of red along the outside of the wound here. Get the trauma wheel again. Now we have to think about the physics of the cut. I'm such a perfectionist, I'd really like to do this right, but I don't think you need to see me blend this. But I wanted you to get the idea of how you go about it. You see, you just use kind of a finger feathering and that'll blend into the skin really nicely. We have to think about the physics of the cut. Maybe the person made the cut this way, so blood would be pouring down here. If they held that hand up here, blood's going to come down here. So you have to think a little bit about it. So I'm just going to come along the inside of the wound on the top. And then I'm going to take some simulated abrasion blood, and I'll just work from my hand for convenience. There's our abrasion blood. And then I'm just going to take a small, again a fine point synthetic brush, and I'm going to grab a little of this abrasion blood, and I'm going to try to think about its normal flow pattern and how recently this has been cut. I'm just going to build that up. One nasty thing I've done in the past is do both wrists this way and then run up and down the halls of my apartment building asking for a paramedic at Halloween. It's surprising how little sense of humor people have about that. But it's fun. So then we're just going to put in our abrasion blood and try to think about where the hemorrhage is coming from. Now, there's a radial artery in here, so maybe if there was a cut, there was some initial burst of blood. I mean, it'd be more than a burst of blood. I mean, if they cut the radial artery, it would be popping. You'd use a squib. But just for fun, it's something we might hold. We might talk about a person that's holding their hand down in this position. So to try to think about the physics of the injury. So there we have a little bit of a cut, and I think it would be rather messy in and around, so we'd probably have something like this occurring as well. And then finally you can take the pan stick and any edges which are not really nicely sealed and blended into the skin. This pan stick may be the right color. I tried to pick the right color. Obviously you can use a grease-based foundations of any type to blend into the wax. And I kind of like the distress in the area. I would probably remove this part, because it's not really helping the effect and it's kind of getting in the way. So clean that up a little bit. And then maybe blend that down and into the skin. So there you have a slit wrist, which if you put a little more blood product, we then begin to get a sense of the injury and how it might have occurred. So a person simply cut it, and there we have a slit wrist. It's a nice effect, I think, and you can use this principle to do bullet wounds and other exit wounds, and we'll cover that next.